Hello.
Hello, and welcome back again. I'm Candace.
And I'm Val.
And welcome to our Closing the Early Literacy Gap podcast.
This podcast is for anyone who has anything to do with small children or anyone working with those in the early stages of literacy learning or learning how to read.
Yes, parents, teachers, administration.
People who are training or coaching teachers in any way. Anyone.
This podcast is for anyone. Hello again, and thank you so much for joining us. We're on episode 11. We are so excited that you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about sight words.
Now, sight words.
Yes, sight words.
What are sight words?
So when I was growing up, I remember having spelling lists where we would have to write down all the sight words and their correct spelling. And sight words are words that you have to memorize and know them by sight. So when I was growing up, my definition of sight words is different than what I think sight words truly are. Because my definition was, here's these list of sight words that are undecodable, and you just have to memorize them, right? So you have to know them by sight, which was the definition I grew up with. However, I feel like it's different. I feel like the correct word for these, and there's multiple different terms or words that are used to describe sight words. Sight words is probably the most known. And then there's heart words, because you have to memorize them by heart. And then there's high frequency words. And I think high frequency words is more accurate because they are just words that occur. They're more common. You see them more often.
So there are lists of these words that most programs have. And most of the programs have gotten these words from one of two lists, the Fray list, which was done by somebody with the last name of Fray.
Yes.
And the Dolch list, which I believe is the same kind of thing.
And I use the Fray word.
So do I. That's what I've always used. So I don't know how the Dolch, I think I have a copy of the Dolch list somewhere, but I've never compared it to see how different it is. But supposedly they're like the most common words, right?
Yeah.
And how many, like the Fray list goes up to like 1,000.
Yes, it does. There's 10 lists of 100. So it goes up to 1,000.
So like the 1,000 most common words.
Yes.
And that's what, and that it's just directly the most common words. It's not necessarily words that you can't decode.
Right. And I think that's important to go through because as we've mentioned before, decoding is super important. So even with these words that we're supposed to memorize by sight, and for those of you who are just listening, I put memorize in quotation marks because you shouldn't.
Right. And we're going to talk about that today.
Yes.
About how our language is, and actually this has occurred to me now. It's not in our notes, but I think it's kind of an important point. I was listening to something recently about the history of the alphabet.
Okay. Tell me.
I won't go into the history of the alphabet so much, but except for that, the thing that I was listening to was saying that the alphabet was actually invented by people who had a difficult time memorizing words. And they were like, there's just way too many words. You know, like if you look at Egyptian hieroglyphs, right? You know, each picture is for a different word. And so it was very complex and difficult and not very many people knew how to read and write.
Right.
But these guys thought, well, couldn't we come up with a symbol for each sound and then we can do the sound. So it was like this brilliant new idea that was supposed to help people to be able to read and write because they wouldn't have to memorize all the words.
All those
Instead, they just had to memorize a symbol for each sound, and then they could put words together based on what sounds they make. And so that's the alphabetic principle.
Oh,
right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So anyway,
I love learning.
That just came to my mind as we were doing this, and I think that's important because the whole idea of just having to memorize the words just takes us back to the dark ages.
Yeah.
Back to the time when writing was like a different symbol for every word and you had to memorize every single one. There's just too many of them.
Oh, yeah.
So in some ways, education has gone back to that too much. And when we try to make kids memorize, but there are some words that are not decodable in those Fray lists.
100% accurate. But I want to stop just for a second before we go into that, because a lot of people, especially who grew up in my generation, right, born in the 80s, we were all taught the same thing. So how are these words decodable? What do you mean these words are decodable?
What do you mean you were all taught the same thing?
We were all taught that you just had to memorize them.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We were all just taught, you memorize it. This word is there.
Right.
You know, there's 3 different kinds of there.
There are 4 types of words, I think, in the Fray list or the Dolch list that people would call sight words or heart words or
high frequency words.
About high frequency word is a good term.
Yes.
Because they are high frequently. They are the words that are most common. Yes. So, but there are 4 different types of high frequency words. There's ones that are decodable. Yes. Completely decodable. Like and.
Yep.
You know,
sound out each sound.
Each sound can be sounded out. You can teach kids really early at the very beginning stages of phonics instruction. Yep. And they can sound it out and know it. Okay. And then there's the ones that are not yet decodable, or they're not decodable at the very beginning because they have some more complex rules like the word have. Mm-hmm. Have. Let's tap it out. Have. It's perfectly decodable, except that it has that silent E on the end.
Right.
And that silent E, what the kids first learn about the silent E is that it makes the A say its name.
Right.
And so then it should say have.
But there is the rule where an English word can't end with a V.
Exactly.
So you have to end in E.
Exactly. And that's why have ends in an E, is because we don't end English words with V. So it is a rule about it. And so, but the kids, it's not something you teach the kids in the very early stages of phonics development.
Right.
But yet have is a really common word. And so you want them to learn that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not yet decodable. And then there's the ones that are partially decodable.
Yep.
Like said.
Yes.
Okay. Said, if you tap out the sounds, d. Mm-hmm. You have 3 sounds. And the beginning one matches perfectly.
Yep.
The ending matches perfectly. D. It's just that middle part. We're saying which the kids have learned is a short E sound, but how is said spelled?
It's spelled AI, which is 2 vowel, and the vowel team says
A usually. Like it's not even a later rule.
Right.
AI typically never says
right.
But it does in that word.
Yep.
And so, but I did hear this.
Tell me.
If you think of the past tense of the word said, it's say ed.
Yeah. Oh, say it. Uh-huh.
Say it, and that's probably why it's spelled that way. There's a reason behind. You can look up the etymology and all these things, and I don't know what it is on that one, but I thought that was an interesting.
Yeah.
Look at why it might be spelled said. But anyway, those words are partially decodable, and then the last ones are not decodable, and there are very few words. In fact, the only 2 that I can think of that are not decodable at all are I. Like this eye.
Well, for those that aren't watching, your eyeball.
Your eyeball.
The eye on your face.
Yes.
Because I by itself is decodable.
Right. The word I, pronoun I,
is
decodable because it's a long I sound in an open accent syllable.
Yep.
But EYE would say, how would we decode that?
You
or E. No, it's vowel consonant E.
Yeah.
So it'd be E. Yeah.
And that's not what it is. All. So that one, for instance, you would have to memorize.
It's not decodable. You do have to memorize that one. Another one is of. Mm-hmm. Because lots of kids spell it this way. We teach first grade, and if they're spelling phonetically, they would write UV.
Yes.
But we spell it OF. So it's completely not decodable, but it's also very common. So, but there's very few of those. So how do you think we should teach them if it's not just like memorize all these words?
I think you need to, I think it's important that you teach them the words that they're going to see the most is the ones you should start with, right? So teach them, I think you need to start with the ones that they're going to see the most in very early literacy, starting reading.
And so you should just have them memorize them?
No, I think you need to teach them the parts that are decodable. And the ones that, they can decode, just teach it like a normal decodable word. I don't, it's not just. And so what I do is I have these words and I have them on flashcards, and I do flashcards. Mm-hmm. But when I'm doing flashcards, I go over the rules and I go over little tips and tricks on this is why it says this way. And I do that while I'm doing flashcards. It's not just a, hey, we're just getting through these speed until my expectation is that they're fluent. Yeah.
So the ultimate goal of reading is to be able to read every single word by sight.
Yes.
Automatically, should be accurately, and effortlessly.
Right.
Every single word. And you're not a good reader until you can do that. But that has led some people astray a little bit to think that good readers are readers that just know the words instantly and can read them instantly. So as long as we can get our kids to do that, even if we have to just have them memorize them, then that's the way to teach.
Right, which is so sad because that's what causes a lot of guessing.
It does. It causes way too much
guessing. Because they're worried more about the speed and just trying to get through it.
Right.
Because kids know when they're being timed. Kids know when you're looking for speed.
Yeah.
And they just want to get through it. And so if they're not sure, then they'll just maybe read a word or two correctly, and then they'll just kind of go off of context and just start guessing. First letter, yeah. And it's a lot of errors.
Well, and there are a lot of high frequency words that look alike.
Yes.
Like were and where.
Yes, and I have a jingle for that.
Okay.
So on my cards, right? We say the word, I do my cards like this, right? So I go, where, and then they repeat it to me. Where, and usually right after or right before, I have were, right? So were, we go, ER says we talk about that. That's introduced, okay? And it's just were. And so that one just kind of is more high frequency. We work on it. But with where, what we do is I say this sentence. Where do you hang the flag? On the H. And so they know that with the H, it's straight like a flagpole. Mm-hmm. And where do you hang the flag? On the H. So when they see the WH with the ERE, they know it says where.
That's brilliant. That's great. I love that. Okay. Actually, let's do a little sort on the words. Okay. Right here. We'll just... I'll throw out some of the high frequency words from the Fray list, and then you see if you can decide if it's decodable, not yet decodable, partially decodable, or not decodable at all.
Okay, and then you that's listening or watching, see
if you can do it.
See if we agree. See if we're on the same one, or not.
We'll see. Okay. How about the word that?
Decodable. TH says at.
Great. And it could maybe not be decodable yet if you haven't touched TH, but most programs teach that
pretty early.
Yeah. So okay. How about the?
I would say the is partially decodable unless you've taught the schwa.
Okay. So actually, I would agree with you. Not yet decodable could also be partially decodable because I would say the is not yet decodable but you can decode it as the. And some programs do.
Yes.
But we pronounce it more often the, and they need to learn that. And it's because of the schwa. It's an unaccented word. And so the schwa steps in and does it. And so tell the kids have learned the schwa. And it depends on the program for how early that is.
Yeah.
But so it would be partially decodable until you teach it. So really not yet decodable. Yeah. Okay. How about do? Like, there's 3 different spellings of the word do.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, do you want to help me with this word sort?
Okay, perfect. Because that's what I was going to ask. Which do? Okay, so do, D-O, I would say not yet decodable. Or, well, no, partially. Because you can decode the D, but oo is spelled O-O most of the time.
Almost never spelled with just one O.
Yeah.
And the typical rule is that if you have a vowel in an open syllable, meaning there's no consonant after it to close it, then it's going to say its name. It's going to say O, like dough. But it doesn't say that. Right.
It says do. So I'd say partially.
And there is another word like that, which is to.
Yes.
So there's a couple
depending on the two, right? I mean, because you have
for sure
T-O-O, which is decodable.
Completely decodable.
T-O.
And what about T-W-O?
T-W-O, I would say not. Partially, because the WO is going to throw you. It would say
two. Okay, but did you know I learned something interesting?
Two.
Is it? Oh, maybe it's not on this one. If you look at the etymology of the word to, that TW almost always indicates having to do with to, like twist.
Yeah.
Has two things twisted together.
Yep. And I teach
20, you know,
that
yeah.
TW says tw.
Yeah. But the T and the W together has meaning. It's etymology is the study of the history of words and where they came from.
Okay.
So if you look at the etymology, and we should have done that before. This was really spontaneous, but I know there's etymology behind the reason that two is spelled with the TWO.
Depending on where it came from.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of the number 2, what about the number 1?
Not decodable.
Not decodable.
The number 1. Not decodable.
Not decodable, except for the letter N.
Right.
But really, that's so far out there because the word won as in I won the game.
Yeah.
How about that one?
I would say partially because O says
I would say not yet because there's actually the scribal O. Do you know about scribal O?
I don't know about scribal O.
Well, scribal O is if you have O before an N, M, or V, it often says schwa. Oh. It's part of the schwa.
The more you know.
Yes. So
okay.
Anyway.
Now I just learned
and
about
they call it scribal because something to do with like when they were looking at the scribe's handwriting, they mixed up the O or the U or something like that. Oh, I don't know. Something when it went to an M or an N or a V.
Anyway. You should do the etymology research on that.
Yeah, I learned it once, but I'm just trying to remember what I came up. So there's that word, one. Yeah, that one's a 1. Oh, the number 1. Back to that one. Yeah. It starts with an O.
Yep.
Not a woo. And so that one's really, really, really I would tricky. Put that really on you really have to memorize it.
So when I do that one, because it is one that you just have to memorize, we go 1 1 1 1 1 number 1 O-N-E. And we
so many fun
spell it out
and stuff. You're such a fun teacher.
Because I like to sing. I'm not good at it.
But the kids love it.
I'm not a music teacher.
Kids love her. They love her. She's so fun.
But yeah,
she's so fun.
I do that.
Okay, how about this word? All.
I teach that one as an irregular vowel because ALL or AL says all.
So would you say it's partially decodable or not yet decodable?
I would say not yet until you teach that rule.
Until you teach that when A comes before L, it says
right, but then you have owl.
Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, like
sometimes
Alvin.
It doesn't. Yeah, that's true.
You know, but yeah.
But even when you have like, okay, what about this word? Let's throw this word. Walk.
I teach ALK is an irregular vowel.
Okay. So that again is the A before the L. It's still saying but if it comes before a K, the L is usually silent.
Yeah.
So many different rules.
It's so different.
It's really
what about who?
Ooh. That one is completely not decodable, I think.
I would agree with you.
Ooh, yeah.
Because it starts with the W.
That's a good one.
And then you have the H, which doesn't say anything.
Right.
Well, no, it does, but not at the beginning.
Okay.
And then the O.
We're having so much fun. But we really need to wrap this up. Yes. And we need to talk about how do we teach these if we're not just going to memorize. Like, how would you go about teaching these? And I really love what the Letters Manual taught about this. And they call them heart words.
Yes.
And so if you take the word said, let's do said. Okay. Said's a really good one to kind of demonstrate because it is partially decodable. Most of them are partially decodable. You would have the kids still tap out the sounds because it's important for them to hear the sounds. And here's why. Here's why it's really important because we were talking about this and then we got sidetracked. But good readers actually do look at all the parts of the words. And so just from this book, Reading Above the Fray, there's a great quote in it, but is also in the Letters Manual that I read it originally, but I really like how Julia Lindsey words this. She says, current research using eye tracking technology and brain imaging provides a consensus that to recognize a word, even proficient readers use its letters and the position of those letters in relation to all the other letters. So proficient readers aren't just looking at the words and looking at the first sound and just memorizing it, or that they know it because they memorized it and seen it so much. They're not seeing the whole word. They are seeing it in individual letters. That's how good readers can identify were from where.
Yes.
Girl from grill.
Yep.
Just all those words that are just slightly different. So the kids do need to train their brains to do the phonics and the phonology behind them. Yes. But when you have one irregular, there's one program, the Reading Mastery program, that has the kids has the kids sound it out the funny way.
Yeah, they do.
So they would
the
go, id. That's how we sound it out, but how do we say it? Said.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good too, because it still teaches them the sounds and helps them decode it.
Yep.
But in the letters manual, it talks about doing the d, and then mapping it out with magnets or something. And then, okay, this, how do we spell that? With an S. The we would regularly spell that with an but in this case, we spell it with an AI. So we're going to put a heart above that, because we have to memorize that part. Just that part. And then the d.
Mm-hmm.
So then and if they do it enough, they learn to recognize it, but they still know that it says d,
right?
And they understand where it came. So to a point.
Yes, absolutely. And then there's another quote here that Belle really likes, and I'm going to let her tell it to you in the scientific way. And then I'm going to tell it,
in your own words.
In my own words, because for me, when I hear a whole bunch of rare words or $10 words is what I like to call them. I think I heard that from letters as $10 words. Which is just a really rare, like it's a good vocabulary word, right? And Belle's going to use a lot of $10 words in this. But sometimes it's hard it takes me a little bit longer to comprehend. So,
okay. So it says, and where is this quote
right there
from? Oh, this is also from Julia Lindsey.
Yes.
Okay. Reading above the fray. Current theories suggest that to read an individual word, a child needs to create an orthographic map by linking the word's orthographic information, spelling, to its phonology, pronunciation, and semantic information, meaning.
Okay, so let's break that down just a tad, and then we're going to be done with this for today. But what it's saying is that to read an individual word, a child needs to create the orthographic map in their brain, so they need to be able to link these things together, and they need to be able to link the spelling of the word, the pronunciation of the word, and the meaning of the word. So in order for them to...
Spelling, pronunciation, meaning.
Yes. So in order to read the word, they need to have all three of those things linked together at the same time. So they know what they're reading, or they see the spelling, they know how to pronounce it correctly, even if it has irregular vowels or different sounds, right? And then they know what that word means.
And they need to be able to do all that automatically, effortlessly.
Yes. It's a lot in the brain.
Yeah, it's a lot in the brain.
Yeah.
But they can do that. Our brains do it amazingly well.
Yes,
so thank you for joining us. Our next episode, we're going to talk about how we take these effortless high frequency words and learn them by sight and turn them into fluent reading. So join us next time when we talk about reading fluency.
Have a great day, and thanks for joining us.
Bye.